In 2016, then superstar and yet-to-be social martyr Colin Kaepernick refused to stand during the national anthem in protest of oppression of Black people in America. The ensuing tsunami of both support and dissent from owners, players, the NFL, and fans led many to believe that the first steps towards true progress in the fight for equality was beginning. This discourse, while leading to many players taking money and time to work in their communities, ultimately resulted in Kaepernick being blackballed from a job at quarterback and set to rot on the shelf, while even players from alternative leagues got chances at starting games. Conversations involving race and injustice towards minorities slowly died down as many cried out for sports to remain unpolitical and the NFL returned to status quo. Fast forward to late May of this year, when George Floyd, a Black man, was murdered by police officers in Minneapolis on camera. The streets, quiet from COVID-19, swelled with support across the United States and soon the world in protest of police brutality and a system that was built with a strong racial bias. Different from 2016, the movement quickly picked up pace and people began demanding real policy changes. The officers that murdered George Floyd were arrested, and many states have been considering removing qualified immunity, which helps police officers use excessive force indiscriminately. There's still work to be done, as the cops that murdered Breonna Taylor sleeping in her home have not been arrested, and many more cases have been brushed under the rug or lost to time. Players in the NFL have begun speaking out against police brutality again and have managed to get more players involved. They've pledged to kneel and hold their teammates accountable. Assuming the season goes as planned, the preseason in early August will be the first signs of what's to come. Whatever the players decide to do and how they decide to do it will affect how the organizations, the NFL, and the fans react. Hi, my name is Eli, and today I'm joined by my friend Branden. Branden is a Black graduate from the University of Maryland and a Ravens fan. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Glad to be here, man.
Yeah, it's good to see you. We've been friends for, 4 years? It's been a while.
4 or 5. I lose track, honestly. I don't remember when
I don't know. So before we get into the questions, I just want to point out Branden is not a representative of the entire Black community, but he is a Black voice that I think should be heard, and we're going to get his perspective on a lot of these subjects today. So let's get started. Before we get into the podcast, I'd just like to thank everyone out there for listening in. If you like what you hear, make sure to check out whenthelightsgooutpodcast.com. It's our website, and you can find all our podcasts, a bunch of really cool blog posts on a bunch of different subjects that we feel might not need an entire podcast to talk about. Also, shout out to our editor, Kate Rempe. She's been a huge help with the blog posts. And you can also check us out on Instagram at whenthelightsgooutpod and Twitter at lightsgooutpod. So I want to start with Colin Kaepernick. First question, I think I kind of already talked about it at the beginning, but do you think he was blackballed from the NFL?
Definitely. Colin Kaepernick was absolutely blackballed from the NFL. A couple of years beforehand, he was in the Super Bowl. He was in the Super Bowl and was like a play away from winning the thing. I remember because I was biting my nails, because if he had done it, I would have been crying. So there's just no reason that he should have been out of the league for this long, and I think it's pretty clear why.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And more on that, so many people have tried to assassinate his character. I think again it's pretty obvious, but do you think he has done good for the community?
Yeah, definitely. He's got that Know Your Rights camp. I don't remember the specifics of it, but he started a nonprofit to give back to the community, and he's been, he's just been this giant activist and this voice for so long while he's been outside of the league. And so for anyone to sit around and say that, he just wanted attention, that's just obviously not true. They're clearly not paying attention. He's been a huge voice and a huge help.
Yeah, and I'll even add, it seems like he's thrown away his career in the NFL when people I'm a Washington sports fan, so in 2018 when we lost Alex Smith, our starting quarterback, we had Mark Sanchez. Our second quarterback was gone as well from another injury. So we got somebody from the San Diego Fleet, an AAF team, instead of a former
Who?
Super Bowl. I think his name is Josh Johnson. I honestly don't remember.
Oh, okay. I remember him.
Yeah. So yeah, but like, do you think uh, going forward there will be a place for him in the NFL or just like the sports world in general?
I mean, I'm hopeful. The last 4 years have made it. They've made me very pessimistic as far as Cap's career goes. Like you said, you're pulling people out of leagues that we didn't even know existed before we get to a guy who was a couple plays away, like 20 yards away from winning the Super Bowl in one of his first few years. So that's maybe kind of pessimistic as far as his chances go. But recently, Roger Goodell finally gave a statement, quote unquote, and encouraging teams to sign him. I'm hoping that that gets some of these NFL owners and general managers and head coaches. I'm hoping that gets them off their feet a little bit, and hopefully somebody wants to seize the opportunity to get just a great teammate, great competitor, great quarterback. We've seen his gameplay. Get a great quarterback on their team and not continue to blackball this guy.
That's a good point. You raised a lot of good stuff. It would be interesting to see what your thoughts are on where you think he'll end up, like what role he'll play in the NFL, because I know, um, within the next 10 years, the window will close on him being able to play quarterback. But, and we'll talk about this a little later, but in 2017, the NFL Players Coalition, Malcolm Jenkins and a couple other guys formed that. Do you think he'll have maybe a role as, somebody working on behalf of the NFL for some of this stuff, if whether he's a quarterback or not?
I mean, obviously, I want to see the guy. I want to see the guy get behind center again, but like you said, the window's closing there, so we'll see if that actually happens. I got my fingers crossed. But as far as like playing the same kind of role he's been playing the last 4 years or so, for some NFL players, I can't think of a better person to fill that role. Should that be something that the Players Coalition or whatever other organization or whatever other players think that he's got a role to fill in that sense? Yeah, I'd be hard stretched to find somebody better.
Yeah, yeah. And even moving on from Kaepernick, Eric Reed, a guy on the Niners at the same time as Cap, part of those big runs through the postseason. He has been there since the beginning with Cap, and he's a Pro Bowl caliber safety. But when his rookie deal ran out, he also had a hard time finding a job, and he ended up actually signing with the Panthers. Um, but he still kneeled, and he has been outspoken for Kaepernick. Why do you think he ended up getting a job when Colin Kaepernick has clearly been blackballed?
Do you remember did Reed do it the first time that Cap did it too? Like when Cap was sitting, was Reed in on that too or
I
no?
think I don't remember if he was sitting, but I believe he was kneeling
Okay.
since like when that season started. Because Kaepernick, if I recall correctly, Kaepernick sat during the national anthem during a preseason game of the 2016 season. Like I think it was the first one during the national anthem, and that started the conversation. And then throughout the preseason, it expanded. And by the time the season started, Eric Reed was
Okay.
there. I don't know if he was there at the beginning though.
Yeah, because I remember Cap was sitting, and then um, a Marine, I think it was a Marine that talked to him, Nate Boyer,
Yeah,
went and had a conversation with him because he got mad and was like, "Okay, well, you got a really good message here. How about you kneel instead?" And then
right.
that's how it happened. I don't know if Reed was in on that from the beginning, but to answer your question, it sounds like Cap started it. As far as I can recall, Cap was the one who did it first. And even if Reed was there from the beginning, Cap's the bigger name. He was a couple plays away from being Super Bowl MVP, and was before Lamar Jackson came in. You talk about running quarterbacks after Vic. One of the names you're going to bring up is Kaepernick, tearing up the field like he did. So he's just already got this bigger name. He did it first, and so the whole issue was Kaepernick. The whole issue in headlines was Colin Kaepernick is kneeling for the national anthem. How dare he? And so his actions are just so bold for such a big name that um he's going to get blackballed the hardest. Bigger name, bigger reputation, bigger result.
The bigger you are, the harder you fall.
Right. So not as much outrage over Eric Reed because not quite as well known of a name, but no one wants to be that team that signed Colin Kaepernick. No one wants to be that team that gave Colin Kaepernick another shot in the NFL because the headlines all said Colin Kaepernick and others kneel for the national anthem.
Right. You think, and this may be a leading question, but I mean, knowing how fans and like NFL franchises see the quarterback position, do you think maybe like they were like they don't want, civil rights and the Black Lives Matter movement to be the face of their franchise with Colin Kaepernick, whereas Eric Reed is not going to be the face of your franchise because he's not a quarterback?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like you said, people hold the quarterback position so high and in such leadership. Example of that was Nick Bosa. He's been very active on Twitter in ways that a lot of players and a lot of people, including myself, don't necessarily support. I'm not a big fan. Here he still is on the Niners. I didn't see a huge outrage about him. People, of course, had issues, but then you saw what happened when Drew Brees came out and said, "I don't stand for if anyone kneels for the anthem, that's wrong, and here's why. My country, my grandfather, my World War II.
Yeah.
Yay, patriotism." And so many people immediately just drew, no, that's not what this is. He prompted such a big response because it's Drew Brees. It's the quarterback of the Saints. It's such a big name. Whereas, people were upset about Nick Bosa. But, it didn't really seem like the 49ers organization was all about what Nick Bosa had to say, even though they happened to be the same ones that blackballed.
Right. Yeah. They didn't make a huge statement about it, I don't think either. But talking about Drew Brees, it's interesting you say like he's the big name, he's the quarterback, he's important, and it's really interesting to see the parallels between him and Kaepernick, where Kaepernick was that guy that was talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and protesting police brutality, and he fell so hard. And Drew Brees is like the same situation but on the other side almost, and now how the narrative has kind of flipped to where it's more popular for people to speak out. Well, I guess, what do you think we're going to talk about Drew Brees in a second, but what do you think has changed in the past 4 years to allow that paradigm shift?
I guess, not to be morbid, but more Black people died. We keep seeing this. It keeps happening. People are running out of excuses for the reasons that they're not listening, the reasons that they're not supporting this. And players have just been players and just people, the social media world, have been constantly having to pound down everyone's throats. Hey, this is not about the anthem. This is not about the anthem. This is about more than that. This is about the Black Lives Matter movement. This is about, this, even if it is about the anthem, this anthem doesn't necessarily speak for me, which, I shouldn't even say it's not about the anthem. I shouldn't even utter those words.
No, it's not.
It's not. So let me just straighten that up right there. But, we've just had so much more time for their point to be proven over and over and over again, because the point is valid. So, if something's broke, you're not fixing it. It's just going to become even more clear. It's going to do more damage, and it's become harder and harder for people to brush it aside. And now we're at a point where it's like, come on, like, how do you still not get it?
Yeah. He was shamed publicly by former players that played with him and against him. A lot of people, including, again, Malcolm Jenkins, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, who was his teammate and is now his teammate again. But do you think that type of public shaming, from these, especially people with platforms, but it seems like a lot of people who are, regular, like you and I, have been doing it, and it's working. Do you think that type of public shaming is good, or at least the result is?
It appeared to be this case, so I mean,
Yeah,
I guess the results speak for themselves. But yeah, I think it seemed like it was necessary in this case because again, such a big name like Drew Brees, um, and also the amount of "thank you, Drew" responses that I saw right after he made those comments. Um, those are the same people, the people sitting back in their chairs saying, thank you, Drew. Here's a guy who gets it. They're going to need this, like the other 50 members of their team to come out and denounce this to show like, hey, sure, whatever. Maybe you like what Drew Brees said, but the entire Saints team is coming out and saying, nope, that ain't it. You think that's a coincidence, man? Or like, come on now. And he's got such a big image. Drew Brees does. He's seen as like a leader. He's seen as a role model. This dude won. He won the Walter Payton Man of the Year award, didn't he?
he did.
Uh,
He did.
so you get that badge on your jersey. It says, "Hey, I have all the right values of a man that should be held high." And for someone like that to go out and say the things that he did, um, now you're going to have so many people internalizing that and thinking, oh, okay, Drew gets it. He's on the right page. Drew Brees says it, so it must be right. And you're going to need a lot of players to come out and denounce that in order to overturn what Drew Brees said. Luckily this time it could have gone so much worse, but luckily they actually got through to him. So it appears. I can't speak to his heart, but I can speak to what he actually said. It appears they actually got through to him, and he even finally acknowledged, this is not about the anthem. We still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, that's right. He came out publicly and said that, which I think is a huge victory for football fans. Truly, you said he is a Walter Payton Man of the Year award, and I mean that's such a huge honor. If you talk to people in the NFL, they've said that is one of the highest honors you can get. They wear that now on their helmet and their jersey after you get it forever. So it's like it's
literally
yours.
A badge of honor.
It's literally a badge of honor, right? And Walter Payton, sweetness, a black man. Like, how are you going to, knowing that you have that badge of honor? How are you going to do that? And the other thing I think I'll add to this is, you're right that he's such a big figure that his legacy is not going to be tarnished by people coming out and saying you need to change, and especially since he publicly did. So, yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. But how do you think the situation would be different if it were someone who had more of a say in the organization, like a coach, a GM, or an owner?
I think we would have seen a lot of the same reactions. And we saw, I think it was Malcolm Jenkins was the first response that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
And he was getting really emotional. He's got such a big tie to Drew. And he feels like, there's a brother of mine, and I put the team on my back. I put Drew on my back. He puts me on his every time I go out there. So we see that bond and how that affected them into speaking out the way they did. There's so many player-coach bonds like that as well. Like as a Ravens fan, I'm seeing it happen with Lamar and John Harbaugh. And heaven forbid John Harbaugh were to come out and say something like that, which thank God he's got his head on his shoulders. But I think we would have seen the same thing. We would have seen a lot of people know that, hey, they need to come out and denounce what they said in a way that shows like, this hurts that I have to say this to you, but you're wrong and you hurt me and this is awful. Unfortunately, what I think would happen if the main difference that I think there is, if it were an owner, GM, or coach, we'd probably see a lot more players walk right then and there. Because there's this sense that you play for them. Like, yeah, of course, people, Drew's running backs, his cornerbacks, his O-line, they play for Drew in the same way that they all play for each other.
Drew doesn't write the checks.
Right. Drew doesn't write the checks, and he's not the you get the title owner of the team. You get the
Right.
title general manager or head coach of the team. So there's more of a sense. Of course, I've never played in the NFL, so I might not even be right here, but I imagine there's more of a sense of, I play for these people, and I'm not going to play for someone who speaks like that. So I think we'd see a lot more people hold out until someone issues an apology, or seek a trade or walk out.
Right, because at that point, what's the harm in hurting the team? If Drew says something, you're hurting the rest of those guys. But if the rest of those guys are being affected by that owner, that GM, whoever, that makes more sense. I get that. And you mentioned Malcolm Jenkins earlier, and we've touched on him a little bit, but he has been a huge voice in the NFL, starting the Players Coalition, working on behalf of civil change. He's done a lot. And I think if you ask anybody around the league and as fans, they see his legacy as like clean and well respected. But Colin Kaepernick, it's very muddy depending on who you ask. And I was thinking about asking this question in a few ways. Like, do you think maybe it's like the way they talk, but they both talk in ways that white people, understand? I'm sure you're aware of code switching, and how differently you talk with people. And that's something we could talk about for a while, but like they both say, in my opinion, the right things in the right ways. But Jenkins, after Colin Kaepernick's disgrace, per se, of the flag, came out and did it slightly different. But I mean, they're essentially fighting for the same thing. So why do you think there's a disparity between the two?
I think it's because of Kaepernick's actions. They were so, I guess, unprecedented. And so like we would have never thought we would have seen that. It's so easy for someone to be asked, hey, do Black Lives Matter? Hey, do you support what Malcolm Jenkins said in his protest or in his message? Do you support those words that he said? And anyone could be like, well, yeah, sure. Whereas Colin Kaepernick went and took a knee and forced everyone's hand. And he took it to another level, saying this gem of a song that you have us play before every single game before we entertain you, this doesn't apply to Black people right now, so I shouldn't stand for this. And the people who, it's interesting how many people hold the national anthem so precious, overlapping with the people who don't support Black Lives Matter. He forced their hand in a way to show their true colors. Like, do you support Colin Kaepernick's actions and words? If you say yes, that means you support people kneeling for the anthem. If you say no, well, now you don't support Black Lives Matter. Of course, you can answer in a way that's not yes or no. And then in hair splitting, you might end up making it about the anthem. So he really just forced people to show their true colors, and the result is not pretty.
No, it's not. And he didn't start the movement. I think in the sports world, he began a conversation that needed to be had, whereas Malcolm Jenkins just articulated it in an amazing way. And he's done so much for his community. But yeah, I think you're right. The stark difference between pre-Kaepernick protest and post-Kaepernick protest is very showing. And in response, I should say, to the protests, started famously by Colin Kaepernick, former players and current players started the Player Coalition. So Malcolm Jenkins was a big part of that. Anquan Bolden, who I believe you remember as a big part of the Ravens Super Bowl team.
Oh, yes.
He also, I believe, played with Kurt Warner in I think his rookie year was the year that they lost to the Steelers, unfortunately. I'm sure you're very sad about that. Boo, Steelers. But so they started the Players Coalition to try to make real change. And I actually just learned recently that the MLB this season, I believe, because there are not many Black players in the MLB, has begun to do something similar. But do you think these kind of, or organizations and like safe spaces for Black people to talk about the issues within a league are necessary. And I mean, I'm going to go out here and say I think they are necessary. But when do you think it will finally be time for them to be disbanded? Like, what do you think is the line where they've done their job?
Um, I don't know that there is a line that says we did it. Um, so long as these issues come up and that we see people treated the way Kaepernick was treated, there's always going to be issues like that. I guess that's the answer then. Is once we stop seeing people treated that way, once we start seeing them as actual players, once we start seeing them as actual people with values and beliefs and with hearts, then that'll be a giant step forward. Um, we've seen some progress with it, with Goodell finally coming out and saying, "Hey, if anyone wants to sign Kaepernick, then maybe they should." Like,
Might be a
yeah,
good idea. Who
yeah.
knows?
Thanks, Roger. But it took 4 years to get a statement like that, and it took 4 years for a lot of these teams to come out and do something like, I don't know, posting a black square on Instagram.
Right. It took 4 years and more murders.
Right. It took 4 more years of the same to get our black square. And so we're a long way from where we need to be. I know, of course, to be fair, a lot of organizations have said more than just posting a black square. They've posted videos and um, they've published things of their players speaking out. I know, like the Ravens have, for example. I follow them pretty closely, so that's the team that I saw do it. But still, it took that long for even those teams to do something on that level. So we still got a long way to go, but I mean, that's a baby step, I suppose.
Yeah, step in the right direction is a step in the right direction, no matter how big. It, going back to one of the other things we were talking about, it was kind of like how the coalition in the MLB or whatever it's called, and it is slightly different because there's less Black players than the NFL. In the NBA, I don't have the number, but it's close to 90% of the players are Black. And there are less players than the MLB and the NFL and pretty much any sports team. I think the maximum roster you can have in the NBA is like 15 players. Like it's not like, yeah, I mean, like you got your starting five, your 6 man, and then your backups. Like that's kind of what you got.
Yeah.
So they don't have any outlet for that, but it's a closer knit, group of players. So do you see that? I guess I should ask, do you think they need one? Because it seems like the entire NBA is already one of those player coalitions.
I mean, if they want to put a name on it, then they definitely should. And if they want to like organize it and like that, I see no issue. I think it would be great for them to do that. I haven't seen the same results from the NBA as we saw from the NFL. Of course, Kaepernick kneeling was just such a huge deal. We did see like LeBron and some other players come out with "I Can't Breathe" shirts and things like that, which they received. They definitely got a bunch of lip for that. But anytime they feel like it's necessary, then I would hope that they don't hesitate to form a coalition like that or just group up.
I love what you said. If they want to put a name on it, they should. But
Right.
Whether they do or not, it's their actions. It's what they do.
They're gonna do it. If they want to put a name on it, awesome.
Exactly. And since we're on the NBA, when we're recording this is days away from the NBA restart. When this is going to come out is like months from now, probably. It's July 26th. It's going to probably come out sometime in September, just in time for the NFL to start. Hey, if it even starts, honestly, right now. And this doesn't even have to be in the podcast. I truly do not know if we will have NFL until like November. I don't know.
I mean, we just saw something with them saying that the NFL Players Association and the owners all reach an agreement. So great, they have guidelines for what they want to do, but
Right.
is it going to be like? Is it actually going to follow through? Is it going to be safe? Like, it's
Yeah, it's basically like 50 to 100 men hugging for like 4 hours and
right,
then saying, all right, no jersey swaps. I don't know.
right. Like,
Anyways,
and they might bubble them too. Like I think that's what they did with the
with
NBA.
the NBA players, they're completely bubbled. The
Yep.
MLB is like a partial bubble. So you only play teams in your division and the other, like the AL division, like the AL East plays the NL East. But
Okay.
it's
If they want to bubble, if the players are okay with bubbling, then awesome, we get NFL. But I
it's
don't blame them for not wanting
it,
that.
but the problem is if they bubble, like that's so many more people because it's like what, like 5 times the number of players and therefore 5 times the number of people involved in
Yeah,
your organization. Just
yeah.
scaling, excuse me, scaling is probably exponential. But we have a whole bunch of shit coming out on that, so don't worry about that. So anyways, so speaking of the NBA restart, as well as the WNBA stuff going on, both uh, associations, I should say, have decided to allow their players to show support for social justice movements on their jerseys, which I think is great. The NFL recently said they would allow this in a similar way, kind of put things on their helmets, but the NBA, you can put names on the back of your jersey or different, phrases and stuff. I mean, do you think it's a great gesture, right? But do you think it's going to be effective?
I mean, it all depends on what the goal is there. If the goal is to keep the memory of those people, like the names that they put on there, alive, and if the goal is to spread awareness, basically, as long as you're defining the goal as much as putting a name on can do, then yeah, it'll be effective. If you slap on a name in the hopes that it does something like as far as change, if you want to see a really big change in the world, then no, it won't be effective in that. It's the same thing as naming a street Black Lives Matter way, or spray painting Black Lives Matter on it, or anything like that we've seen. It's not
Yeah,
going to do anything. It's just
it's
for fun.
nice, but
But
will it do anything?
like that, it won't really change much systemically. But at the same time, these are NBA players. Their job is to play basketball. Of course, they can and should speak out on everything that they can, and um everything that they feel valuable. They're people, but they're not politicians. They're not lawmakers. They're not cops. They're not like they're doing as much as people who have been posting on Instagram and donating have done. They're doing their part, and they're not going to be able to take it into their own hands and create this change. So by using that platform, um, by putting those words and those names on their shoes, their jerseys, on their courts, everything like that, um, they're spreading awareness and using their platform. So yeah, I think it'll be effective in that sense.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Honestly, I have a couple more questions. I want to skip to we touched on it earlier. In 2014, the I Can't Breathe shirts, infamous last words of Eric Gardner, and there were the Ferguson riots, a bunch of stuff happening in that kind of 2013, 2014 era as well, before the Kaepernick protests. Um, Huge stars, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, were getting criticized for wearing those shirts before these games, and now they're allowed to put the names of these murdered people on their backs, and trying to change things, at least in the way they can. It's only been 6 years. What's the change? And you kind of touched on this earlier as well, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's the same as before. Sadly, morbid answers. More people died. It keeps happening. Um, I guess one thing I failed to mention earlier, but we have this one on video. The George Floyd video was so just ridiculous. Like every single person, every high name person, like celebrity that has watched the video and spoke on it, they say the same thing. They're like, I saw the video and I was speechless. Like, what the heck, man?
I honestly, it is even harder for me to watch. It reminded me so much of you remember Kevin Ware? I think it was 2013
Yeah,
NCAA.
the leg.
Basically his leg like fell off. Like it was horrible. And I didn't watch it for 3 or 4 days. And finally somebody showed it to me. And I like there's,
Ugh.
it's even right. Yeah. You shiver. You can't like, I
Jeez.
think except the reaction is not just like that's horrible and gross. Why did I watch that? It's, oh my God, I just watched the life drain out of a human being.
Right. And it's all like even with Kevin Ware, you see it, you shiver, you're like, this is horrible, this is awful. I can't believe I just watched that happen with my own eyes. But we saw what happened before it. He was going to block a shot, or I think he was trying to block it. He was playing basketball.
Yeah, it was
And
playing
when you
basketball.
play basketball, you get hurt. He got hurt real bad. You watch this video, it's like, how does this, we know how it happens, but like, really? Is this real?
Yeah, it's horrible. So still on the NBA, but specifically something you mentioned was individual players' activism. Uh, they're all, each player is one individual person, and they kind of have the same. Uh, in some ways, they have a bigger platform, but really all they can do is what that singular person can do. Donate, vote, all things, by the way, that if you're listening to this, you should do. Like those are clearly good things.
He's
Yeah, please. But the LeBron James Promise School, really awesome. His charitable endeavor. I think it gave like clothes and stuff to these kids whose, if their parents might not have been able to afford them like new clothes every year, and the government like refused to give them clothes every year. You know what I mean? So he took it into his own hands to turn truly the lives around of people who didn't have um, the ability to, and they're children, so it's not like they can. And a lot of those children obviously are black or not white, because that's how the United States is set up. Is you're more likely to be poor if you're black, because we're not going to let you make more money. I mean, some of them are lucky, and we get that. But LeBron James and his Promise School tried to change that. And so what I mean, he's a superstar, and he obviously has a lot of money. I mean, is it his job to do something like this?
um I was thinking about this one for a while before coming on here, and it's tricky because if the question is it LeBron James's job, then no, we know what his job is. He's a forward in the in the NBA. His job is to play basketball and do it really good, which he is good at.
Very good.
Um,
Can confirm.
but I think the question is now, maybe is it his job? No. Is it his burden? Yes. We expect to see people give back in that way because whose job is it to make sure that we have schools like this? It's government officials, and um
And they failed.
there's people. If I go outside right now on the street and ask 10 people, like, say, hey, whose job is it to manage schools? I don't think any of them are going to say LeBron James. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, it's not. No one's going to say Steph. No one's going to say Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, or like no one's going to be tired, but whatever. No one's going to say athletes.
Yeah.
But what we see so often is that these people from these communities who make it out feel the need to give back. And now, who are the people from the communities? Often black and brown kids. How do they make it out? Sports. A lot of times, like, definitely other ways, like numerous other ways, but very largely we see people make it out through sports. That's their ticket. And sports will get you out and pay you very, very, very well. Shoot, Patrick Mahomes just
Oh my God.
My goodness, like I'm speechless. Like that's so much money.
It's so much money.
Patrick Mahomes is gonna own the Chiefs while playing for them. Like
He
he's got so much.
probably should. One thing I think about Tom Brady leaving the Pats is if they had, I think like he probably asked for like a 15% stake in the team, because
Yeah.
at that point, what more?
Like what do you want
What
now?
more is there? More money? Like, come on.
Right. But yeah, it's that sports has that opportunity from it. You can go from a school that, you can barely even learn basic math in it because the school just doesn't have enough money. I'm lucky enough to not fully understand how awful it can be. It can be that bad, but through sports, you can go from a situation like that to signing a contract for $503 million. Like that, I can't believe I just said that word. $503 million.
It's a
It's
lot.
ridiculous.
It's a very specific number, and it's huge.
It's huge. Um, you can do a huge turnaround like that, and in doing so, you get so high up as LeBron James is, and people calling him the GOAT, and people uttering his words. Like the big LeBron James question is, okay, LeBron or MJ, and you can make it that big. You're that big in the world, and you look back on where you came from. Of course you're going to feel a burden to give back. It's not your job. In a perfect world, you would be able to go play basketball because you want to go play basketball, and people who want to fix schools can go and fix those schools. That's not happening. So of course they're going to feel the burden on their shoulders to go and do it. And we've seen that pattern, which is great and all, but now it starts to become, it makes sports this thing where you get so much money and we expect them to just turn around and wave a magic wand over their community and
Yeah.
make it better.
Yeah, it's interesting because there are people and organizations and people in the government even that are trying to do the things that like LeBron James can do, but the wealth inequality in the world is so large that when you're an athlete, a pro athlete, and you can get that much money and actually make change, which is a lot different than if you're just like a regular person, unfortunately. But it's really interesting what you talked about. Like LeBron James, I believe, came from Akron, Ohio, and there's like a lot of kids that come from poorer places that grow up and get to go play basketball or football or soccer or baseball or something, a huge stage, and get a lot of money. But like we often see that, but is it the league's job maybe to pay more money to those areas? Because clearly there are kids coming from poorer areas. A lot of kids come from Texas and Florida, and a lot of kids come from random places out of poverty. Is it those leagues' job to maybe put more money in there? But you'd think, I should say, that there's uh, something to be said if you put more money in an area where you're already getting a lot of great football players, that they'll be better because they can focus more on the sport when they're younger instead of like food or like dying.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, I talk about that.
That's also tricky. I guess I'd answer the same way. Like, is it the NFL's job to put more money into poorer area schools? No, it's not. It'd be great to see. I hope they should donate. That'd be great. It's an expectation. It's a burden. It's um, the privilege to be able to say, hey, we could do this. But at the end of the day, if we're talking about whose job is it to make sure that these things are on the table for these communities, if I go out and ask someone, say, hey, whose job is it to make sure that these schools have clean water fountains and have good cafeterias and good equipment, I would be shocked if anyone said, oh, Roger Goodell and the NFL owners, they should go fix these schools. They have the means to. Again, that it'd be great to see them donate and play their role, but it's at the end of the day, we need to see it come from the people who took a job to do that.
That's a very good point, and I think it's something that people who talk about activism in sports don't talk about a lot. The fact that it's not their job and they're doing it, and it's great that they're doing it, but they shouldn't have to. Yeah,
Right.
that's really important that I think people should know. Switching gears a little bit, the issues we're talking about don't just affect these adults, and I mean a lot of NBA players are kind of young, but like they have jobs, they're making money. College athletes in general have the platforms, maybe smaller than their professional counterparts, but they're still platforms. They just don't make the money. You and I met in marching band at the University of Maryland. Awesome time, really great. And during 2016, the Colin Kaepernick happened, and the ability or the opportunity to kneel was present. It was real. Many people did it. I personally did not, and that's one of my regrets. You don't have to feel sorry for me. It's like, it's one of those things where I wish I had done it. I wish I had been able to understand it, but I was terrified because I just like didn't understand what would happen if I did it. And I think that's the problem with a lot of these college athletes is like, do you blame them maybe for not protesting when they have platforms, when they could potentially throw away their career or some money?
Um, I'd say no. I can't blame them for. Of course, I'll always hold them accountable for their words. If one of them says something stupid, then you said something stupid, and you need
Of
to deal with
course. Yeah.
that. If you did something stupid, then you did something stupid. But as far as using their platform and the same kind of questions that we just talked about with the NFL, we have come to a point where we make such a big deal out of college sports, and it's really not uncommon. Granted, he's in the NFL now, but a few months ago that wasn't the case. That we would utter the same in the same sentence. We'd utter the names Joe Burrow and Tom Brady.
That's true.
Um, and what we need to remember is Lamar Jackson, for example, he's heading into his third NFL season. He's only 23. The dude's younger than me.
Jesus.
Yeah, I'm older than him by like a couple weeks.
Oh no.
Zion Williamson, he just turned 20 this month.
He's a child.
Yeah. I looked that up earlier before coming on here. I was curious. It's like, how old is Zion now? He just turned 20. And what we also have to remember
we watched him play in college.
Yeah. We were like, what we were watching was his freshman year of college. And
oh my God.
Only freshman year. And another important thing about that, if it weren't for coronavirus, the season would be over, which means Zion would have finished his first full NBA season at the age of 19.
Oh, man.
These are kids. These are, if you ask me these questions, which I still don't have it all together as far as processing all of this, no one should ever have to, but I'm still getting it all together. And if you asked me freshman year of college to weigh in on all these, my head would be spinning. I'd have things to say. I'd have things that I would say right. I'd have things that I'd say wrong. But I was a kid. I wouldn't know what I was talking about. And we expect these similar actions from these kids, these people who are entering college, like arguably the most eye-opening phase of their life. And I know it probably was for me. The most eye-opening 4 years of your life, and so many of them they go one and done. Especially NBA, they go 1 year of college because they have to, and then it's straight to the league. And there's just still so much that they have to figure out. LeBron James is 35.
He's got 2 kids.
Right. LeBron is 35. Tom Brady, what is he, 41, 42?
I think he's 43.
Like
or about to be. It's crazy.
Yeah, like that's a grown man. And there's a reason that we call it professional. That word has more to do with it than just what association you play for. There's a reason it's called professional football. The people that are in there, they're professionals. Even like they don't have PhDs or anything, but they're just in this next phase of life as far as perfecting what they do. And along with that comes this sense of maturity that I don't think we can expect from. We tend to expect it, but we shouldn't expect it as much from these kids in college, these freshmen, these sophomores, even seniors, they still trying to get it together. Of course, again, I say, if you say something stupid, you said something stupid. If you did something stupid, you did something stupid. So that's just no excuse there. Like they don't get a pass or anything like that.
Mhm.
Oh, young and dumb. Like, no, that's not what this is.
Right.
But as far as these huge gestures and weighing in and trying to change the world the way we kind of expect from professionals, I think that's a muddy area to get into.
Yeah, I mean,
And another thing, like, as far as ruining their shot, college, it's still a requirement for their career too. The same way, like, I went to college, I went and got my bachelor's degree. Why did I get a bachelor's degree? To go do a job. College football might as well just be the bachelor's degree of football. They still need to go in. They need to do their thing, and it's a job opportunity for them. And anything that they would do to ruin that, you can't blame them for trying to take that seriously. Yeah, it's a lot. We put a lot on college players' shoulders in so many different ways.
you're so right, and I think a lot of the stuff that you just talked about and have been talking about this entire interview has been putting. It's kind of surrounding the idea that we as a society put these athletes on a pedestal,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're in college or playing professionally, and maybe we shouldn't put as much stake in their words and their actions as we do. I mean, obviously they're people and a lot of them are very smart and have really amazing ideas and do a lot of really good things, but it's almost like pushing the responsibility away from yourself. Like, oh, he's got the money, let's make LeBron James do the good stuff. It's like, no, like, I have one vote, LeBron James has one vote, we are equal in the eyes of the law, let's vote. uh,
Exactly.
uh,
Exactly.
and also one thing I should say is, as a white person, if you can't tell, I'm pretty white. um, uh, the idea that if you're a white college athlete and you're afraid of speaking out, you have less to lose and honestly more to gain. Like, think about all of the white players in the NFL, like Chris Long, and albeit they do great work, people who are activists for black rights and civil rights, and all of these really great important social issues, they don't get the backlash that the Colin Kaepernicks get because of the color of their skin, and that right there is like the problem.
Right.
Easy to see, but I think we should put obviously they're kids, they're all kids, college athletes, and so it's hard to blame them for decisions when they're so young for protecting themselves because they can be scared. But if you're white, you already feel safer to do things and speak your mind than you would if you were black. um, so there's so many sides to these issues, is what I'm trying to say. I think we've been talking for a while now, but I just want to touch on one thing really quickly. Probably who's done the sports league that has done the best job, hands down, for no reason that I personally understand, is NASCAR.
Just think about that for a little while, though.
Yeah, like, I mean, obviously, like, they have black people that watch NASCAR, but like the
Like,
idea of NASCAR is so symbolic with white people, or not symbolic, but I feel like they coexist very well. Um, and yet they have been teaching their fans about racial inclusivity with Bubba Wallace and all of the stuff that's happened around him. I mean, is it their job, especially knowing how many white people watch NASCAR?
Um, again, like, same thing. Like, their job, no. Their job is NASCAR. Their job is make an arena, make cars go fast in it, and make people happy.
Yo, go vroom vroom,
Yeah,
drink
go
milk.
go vroom and checkered flags and all that. Yeah, NASCAR. That's about all I understand of it.
That's all it is.
I think that's about all there is. But they've got a bigger burden. They've got more ground to cover, and it's interesting because they can make even less controversial takes and be praised even higher for it.
Yeah.
Like the Confederate flag, they banned it from their stadiums, which great. It seems like such this ridiculous move, not ridiculous, but this groundbreaking, earth-shattering move.
1865, never heard of her.
Right. On their part. And really, you think about it, it's like, that was allowed? Like, why was this allowed? So they definitely have the audience that they could make a lot of progress in. I guess that's a good point to make in terms of asking, is it their job to educate their fans? Well, considering who their fans are and the opportunity that they have, yeah, they've got all the opportunity in the world to make a big impact. But again, same thing as NFL, MLB, NBA, LeBron, all them. Is it their job? No, it's the people who sign up to it's the government. The government needs to be better.
It might not be their job, but they have the opportunity to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And also Bubba Wallace himself. I mean, I believe he is the only full-time black NASCAR driver.
Right.
And he is now a nationally recognized black athlete in the most white sport we have in America, at least. I mean, this is kind of a stupid question because I think it's pretty obvious, but do you think he will help the movement long term because of his positioning, or is he just another black athlete with ideas? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, he's got such a spotlight on him because of the arena that he's in. And if it adds to how much it will depend on what he says, what he does. It exponentially adds to it. You look at the NFL, you can have one player do one thing and say, I'm black and I feel this way. And, more than that, but they might say something like that and the whole world might go, whoa, okay, wait, cold take. That's awful. And then, you might get three people right next to him saying, yeah, no, I think what he meant to say, or say, yeah, no, you're wrong, dude. Like, here's the truth. Bubba Wallace in his field, he's alone. So he screws up bad.
Yeah.
Thankfully, so far, he has not screwed up, and I don't think he's on that track to do so. So, a great deal has already been done on his part. He called out the Confederate flag issue, and now look where we are. We NASCAR of all, like just think NASCAR of all still bothers me.
Crazy.
Has told its fans, "Yo, leave the Confederate flag at home, burn it," but but leave it at home, and that's thanks to him so far. So we'll see what he continues to do. I like what he's doing, but yeah, he's on a good track. So I can't imagine it wouldn't help.
Yeah, he's been really awesome walking that tightrope that you mentioned, because he is alone. NASCAR is one of those sports where you're the driver, you mess up, you
Right.
do really well, you do really well. So it's not like you're leaning. I mean, you got pit crew and stuff, but ultimately his stardom is owned by himself. So it's really awesome to see what he's been able to do. Now, we've been talking for a while. I thank you so much for talking with me. I mean, obviously, I think you and I, being friends, and I've seen you on Twitter, and I think you've seen me on Twitter. I think we would have talked about this by ourselves, but it's really, really awesome that you took the time to do this publicly. Do you have anything that you want to say? Because I think it's important that we let Black voices be heard, especially in this time we're living in.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I just reiterate. I'm just one dude. I'm one dude from Maryland. I don't speak on behalf of all Black people. So if you're listening to this, then just get out there, listen to your Black peers' comments. The more, the better. Um, if they don't have any comments at the moment, then respect that. Like, the Black community is exhausted to be the ones going through this and educating the world on this. So respect that. But there's still articles, and there's so many other ways. There's so many other ways to get educated. There's articles you can read. There's books you can read. There's videos you can watch from the past, documentaries. You can follow a hashtag on Instagram and just passively learn. So I mean, we've been at a point now. There's just no excuse to not know what you're talking about. And another thing to touch on is that the people listening to this podcast right now, they're probably not the ones that need to hear it. That's the funny part. That's the world we live in now. They're the ones who are gonna. A lot of them are gonna listen to this and nod their head, maybe disagree with a few details here and there, but overall, they're probably not gonna say, actually, well, this entire thing is wrong and this movement is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone listening to this, like, share as much share as much content as you can while also educating yourself. There's a whole community of people bigger than I'd like to think that needs to hear it so much more than people would think. So continue sharing content and continue educating yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. And I mean, honestly speechless with how effective and insightful you've been today. Really, really awesome stuff. Thank you so much for coming. I mean, we know, both you and I, Brandon, that this is super important stuff, and that's why we're talking about it today. And I think I had a few questions that we didn't actually talk about because when they were coming out, the issues were more at the forefront, like, of the media. So, like, I had a question about the Kyrie Irving saying maybe we shouldn't having the NBA restart because it could take away from the Black Lives Matter movement, and LeBron James saying we can use our platform to help. So I think we should have the NBA restart. That's like gone. Like, that was maybe a month ago that we came up with that question. Like, it wasn't that long ago. So these issues are constantly changing as the world changes, as the sports universe changes. So when this comes out, the situation will probably be so different, and a couple of the questions that and answers that you gave, that were beautifully said, by the way, won't necessarily be as accurate as they are. So it's our job as people interested in sports to keep learning, and I think if we were to revisit this in a year or two, we would have another full set of questions, completely different. So if you're listening to this and you find all of the answers really interesting, I urge you to keep looking for new resources and learning. All right, everybody, thanks so much for listening in. Remember, you can check us out at whenthelightsgooutpodcast.com to see some blog posts, some really interesting stuff there, as well as Instagram at whenthelightsgooutpod and Twitter, Lights Go Out Pod. Thanks for listening to When the Lights Go Out.